I feel like overall, LabVIEW has a much more welcoming community than other programming languages, I think, because I see stuff on like Stack Overflow and things,
Yeah,
and I see people belittling other people who don't have the experience and stuff. And
really.
like, why are you asking these dumb questions? And you should already know that. And I think part of it is as a LabVIEW community, most of us are not computer science majors. So we're all learning and we're all like new to this computer programming, computer engineering thing. So I think there's a little bit more tolerance maybe. Welcome to the LabVIEW Experiment. I'm your host, Sam Taggart from SAS Workshops. If you're a developer looking to unlock your potential and take your skills to the next level, then look no further. From freeing your imagination and experimenting with new ideas and workflows, to exploring aspects of software development you've never even considered before, I'm going to help you grow your craft so you can approach your work like an artist and have more fun with what you do. In my 15 years working with and training developers, I've helped dozens of individuals and organizations embrace a growth and learning mindset that allows us to overcome challenges and embrace failure as the essential learning experience it is. If you're ready for the philosophies, strategies, tips, and tricks that will unlock your creativity, then it's time to get to work. So I am here today with Nancy Henson from NI. And if you've been around the LabVIEW world for a while, you've probably heard of Nancy. She is one of the more vocal and visible engineers within NI. She had positions in the Center of Excellence and worked with the Champions program, and she's now the head of developer relations. So she's always out and about talking to people and going to conferences and giving presentations. So welcome, Nancy.
Thank you, Sam. And I really appreciate and note that you said I am vocal. So I do tend to be a little bit outspoken and I have a loud voice, and I'm really thankful to bring my voice here to the LabVIEW experiment.
That's one of the things I always liked about you at NI, because I feel like you're more connected to the community and you kind of speak loudly for the community, I feel like.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to my early days. So if we dial the clock back a long time ago, I started at NI in the application engineering program back when there was no automation whatsoever, and there were 10 of us in a room answering calls from customers. And then I rolled into sales and came out to Denver, Colorado to do sales for NI. And my original intent was to spend 2 years in Colorado and then go back to Austin and go into a marketing role. And I got to Colorado, fell in love with Colorado, and fell in love with LabVIEW and the LabVIEW community. And so as a salesperson back then, we would spend a lot of time demoing LabVIEW. We would help our customers get started, building their applications. And so we were very hands-on and making sure our customers were successful. And so even though I was working for NI in a sales role, I felt very, very connected to the community. I mean, people who are leaders in our community today, like John Gianangeli, I remember selling him LabVIEW when he was at Exabyte probably, 30 years ago, and helping them get started and teaching the courses. And so I've always felt like I am a part of the community. And sometimes I officially was. In my career, I interned at NI, left to go do something crazy like investment banking, came back to NI, and then I went and did consulting, and now I'm back at NI. And so I've been back and forth a little bit, but I have always felt very, very connected to the community. And even when it wasn't my full-time job, I would find different projects and ways that I could empower the community.
Yeah, that's great. No, and we very much appreciate it. So I know I speak not just for myself, but for all of the champions and many other people. So
yeah, and I'm super excited right now about the Champions program because it's so important, because you guys are the canary in the coal mine. When any company wants to test drive ideas or test drive messaging, when a community has a champions group, that is that safe space to go talk to your lead users and ask them if our new idea and our new initiative is going to resonate or not. And what's interesting about NI is our champions program started back in, I want to say 2006 or so. And I was the first female champion, and I was in the group of first 20 champions. So I was not working at NI, because you can't be a champion if you work for NI. And so I was in that initial group, and And then our group has grown to, how many do we have now?
I think we have close to 200.
Yeah, close to 200. And the Champions program is having at least monthly meetings in addition to all of our conversations on the forums. So what's interesting is that now that I'm in this new role at NI, and I'm technically head of developer relations, and I've started exploring what other what other companies. So as I have started exploring what other companies are doing with developer relations, they all aspire to have what we have at NI with our champions. That's like the goal, to be able to have your advocates that have shown loyalty and interest in the company over decades. And so as I look at what other companies are doing, I'm really thrilled to be stepping into this role while we have such a fantastic champions program. And one of my peers, Eric Reffett, has done a fantastic job of really growing it and engaging with our champions significantly in the last couple of years.
I feel like overall LabVIEW has a much more welcoming community than other programming languages, I think, because I see stuff on like Stack Overflow and things, and I see people belittling other people who don't have the experience and stuff.
Really?
And like, why are you asking these dumb questions? And you should already know that. And I think part of it is, as a LabVIEW community, most of us are not computer science majors. So we're all learning and we're all like new to this computer programming, computer engineering thing. So I think there's a little bit more tolerance maybe.
It's really interesting. And it's good to hear, because I feel like the LabVIEW community has always been welcoming as we encourage new individuals to join user groups or to present. And so I've never seen, any kind of animosity or a real disrespect for someone who hasn't come up the learning curve yet and hasn't really become a master at the craft. And what's interesting is, from an NI software perspective, LabVIEW is our anchor development language. And I'll speak to a couple of things there shortly, or as our conversation continues. So LabVIEW is an anchor. And at the same time, from an NI software perspective, we've realized and understand that when someone is developing an overall test infrastructure, and think about an enterprise level test infrastructure that integrates into the MES system, there are a lot of different tools and IDEs that are involved in building that out. And I'll give an example. So I recently, or last couple of years, I went to a conference related to blockchain. And in particularly, we were in a room for a day, and it was sponsored by IBM, and we were learning about Fabric Hyperledger or I can't even say, Hyperledger Fabric. And I know I got the name wrong, but you can go Google it. And it was interesting because they were talking about how you are successful within their platform. And their framework was inclusive of several programming languages and several IDEs. And so today you have to have a framework that allows different languages to plug in, to connect, to send messages, whatever that architecture ends up looking like. Now, it's very different from when I wrote my first LabVIEW program, and it was very, very simple, and it was just on an Apple at the time, or Macintosh at the time, and then eventually it moved to Windows. But being able to connect to other languages and use LabVIEW in the same way I use Python or I use C# is very, very important to LabVIEW's growth and our growth as a community.
Yeah, I had this conversation this morning with Steve at a virtual coffee thing, and we were talking about using the correct tool for the job. And it's great that you know LabVIEW, and LabVIEW can do a lot of stuff, but is it the best tool for the job? And sometimes it pays to expand your toolbox a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And when I did another software project when I was not technically employed by NI, and I built a database. And the simple fact of building a database, and then I built a web front end to it, I understood LabVIEW better. And it was easier for me to think in LabVIEW. And so anytime I am in a different language or in a different environment and having to learn something, I learn more about LabVIEW, my favorite language, in that process.
Yeah, well, I like looking at other languages and looking at how they solve problems. Yeah. And then it gives me ideas on how to solve those same problems in LabVIEW, because the exact constructs might not carry over, but the ideas, the programming concepts carry over a lot.
Right. And I think we have been very intentional as LabVIEW programmers to really decompose our problem into something that is easy to understand and modular. Because one of the benefits of LabVIEW is I can do a code review. I would say I can do a code review in 45 seconds, roughly.
Well, bad code looks really bad.
Yeah, code, spaghetti code looks like an ugly bowl of spaghetti with a toddler's paint box thrown in it. So bad code in LabVIEW looks horrible. But then the other thing is, I noticed when I was teaching courses, maybe a decade or two ago, that when I was working with customers and they showed me what they've already written, I knew where they learned LabVIEW. Because in our community, we have some very common design patterns. Yep. And so I would know, oh, you must have learned LabVIEW back in the Northeast. You ever lived in Boston before? And the person would have lived in Boston because I was familiar with how they coded things slightly different.
Well, also, Fabiola talks about code archaeology and stuff.
Yes.
And it is very interesting. You look at a code base, particularly one that's lived for a long time, you can tell the learning progression of the person.
Yeah.
Because you can see old modules that are like the old NIQMH, and then, oh, they learned about events. So then there's a bunch of events. And then all of a sudden they learned about something else. And there's a bunch of notifiers. And then there's a DQMH module and maybe an actor. And it's just like this big cobbled together thing of that like shows all the stages of learning.
Yes, all those stages. Speaking of all those stages, I'm going to speak about something I'm not so proud of, maybe a mistake. I have code or wrote code before I really fully understood modularity. And I have a question for you, Sam. So this is a quiz question. I think you can answer it. On the LabVIEW connector pane, what is the maximum number of wires that can connect to that connector pane?
I know there's a 5x5, so that would be 20. Is there a bigger one?
At one point,
actually, there are more. Yeah,
28.
Oh wow! Okay.
I think was the number. I'll have to double check and see if that's still the number because I don't really go check it on that. But I had a 18. VI that I used every single input into the VI.
Yeah, I've seen those.
Yeah, I'm not proud of that.
Yeah.
That was decades ago, though.
Yeah, but you learned.
Yes, I learned. But I want to come back to something you said when you mentioned the LabVIEW community being very warm and inviting, as opposed to the experiences on or that you see on Substack. Because we are going to want to invite our Python developers and our C# developers to become part of our community, to join our user groups and help them understand what they're trying to do as it relates to larger stacks of software. Because I fully expect that in a lot of cases, some young college student or recent grad is going to come into a test challenge and their tool is Python and they're comfortable with it. And they're going to need to better understand what does it mean to write good software for test applications or for engineering science applications that are connecting to hardware. And so as our LabVIEW community grows, we're going to be bringing in these other individuals and insights from them. And so I'm really hoping that they see what you saw, that when they come to our online community, when they come to our conferences, when they come to our user groups, that they come into a user group and maybe they're not interested in learning about LabVIEW, but maybe there's a presentation that is also about Python or also about decomposing my problem, or maybe it's a presentation on how do I get along with the IT department. So I'm hoping, and I'm really excited to bring all these other developers into our community online and in person and make sure it's a warm, inviting place where they can grow.
Yeah, that's why I always like at GDevCon and the other events, I enjoy the presentations that are LabVIEW focused, but I really enjoy some of the presentations, like, for example, at GDevCon and a Hunter Smith's presentation.
Yes.
Because that, yes, he used LabVIEW. Yes, he talked about some LabVIEW features, but most of it is stuff that applies across the board to all software. And so, yeah, I try in a lot of my talks and blogs and podcasts, I try to focus on the higher level stuff because that all transfers.
Yeah, and it's the stuff that we don't go to ni.com to learn it because that's not NI's job to educate people in doing good UX or good UIs.
I will comment on this. So I don't work at NI, so I can comment on this.
Excellent.
I've made this comment several times and probably even on this podcast, but I think the NI, the way they do training, I think is a little, backwards, not backwards. I don't know what the word is, but they focus on how to do things in LabVIEW, but they assume that you already understand the software engineering principles and everything.
Exactly.
And their motto is, well, somebody else can teach that. And yes, but nobody else is teaching that to LabVIEW developers. And so if I want to go learn about test-driven development or something, for the most part, the only classes are in Java or C# or something. And if I'm a LabVIEW developer, I don't want to have to learn that. So I'm actually glad that NI does that, because that leaves room for people like me to come in and create those courses. But yeah, I do think that as a whole.
Bingo, because you just got signed up to teach and deliver those courses. So one of the things I'm super excited about as well is that in this interesting economic environment that we're in, all of us at NI, and I know you guys and every day worldwide, we're trying to do things as efficiently as possible. And so just last week, I had a conversation with our director of education services and was talking about some of the courses that I knew you have developed. There's some getting started material that's being developed by our community. I could name probably 6 or 7 individuals that have some kind of a course that they deliver, like DSH workshops.
Yep.
And there's a lot of interest in figuring out what is going to be the best way for an individual who is on ni.com to find out about your course and other courses. And we don't know the answer to that. And it very well could be that in a future state, when somebody signs an enterprise agreement, there may be a line item for some of your courses or somebody else's courses. I mean, that would be ideal, and we're going to have to figure out how to get there. But again, that's what I love about this community is you guys are passionate about making a difference for others. And of course, we want to do it in a way that we make a buck at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that kind of points to some of the stuff that Lyle's working on with the partner program as well.
Yes.
Is getting partners plugged into those holes, because NI can't do everything. And, if partners are already doing these things, it makes sense to try to figure out how to leverage that.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we look at the transition from, what I affectionately call blue National Instruments to green NI, and moving to a industry-centric focus that we have right now, it is really opening up the opportunity for our distributors, for our partners, and our community members to deeply engage regionally with the engineers and the schools where they live and help grow that community that NI seeded, 20 and 30 years ago, but really dig in and grow that. And so I'm really excited about where things can go in the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, there's been a little bit of grumbling about the distributors thing, but I talk a lot to Steve Watson. I like his perspective of like looking at what you can change and what you can affect and looking for the opportunities. And there's definitely some opportunities there. So there's opportunities to get them involved with the user group. If you're a partner, there's opportunities to go in and help them with sales stuff and help support the people that they're selling stuff to who aren't getting support, and helping people spec hardware and stuff. So there's definitely, you can lament the old ways, but some of those things are gone and aren't coming back. So it's, try to figure out how to make the best of what is there.
Exactly. I wish I had the quote with me, but there's a quote, and I can't even remember who said it, but effectively it is, don't try to fix something that is broken, meaning, we feel like it's broken because it's a new operating model and people are grumbly. Don't try to fix that. Just go create something so much better that people gravitate to. And so that's just another way of saying, I think, what Watt said.
Yeah. No, well, it's the thing of like not running away from something, but running towards something.
Yeah.
So if you have a goal to go towards, that's far more motivating.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So one of the things that I'm excited about as well, is that we have GLA Summit coming up. Mm-hmm. And so when GLA Summit comes up, Eric Greffett and I are going to do the keynote for the GLA Summit. And we really want to build upon what I presented at GDevCon, where we take a look back in history and look at that phrase, LabVIEW everywhere. Because we used to say, it was one of the marketing phrases, LabVIEW everywhere. And I think that was the marketing phrase when we ported LabVIEW to FPGA. And so if I looked at the software stack on a CPU, then LabVIEW would be running the entire application. And it would be running under Windows, it'd be running under a real-time operating system, it'd be running on FPGA. And so it's kind of LabVIEW everywhere on that one piece of equipment. And so now, as we have moved into this cloud transformed world that we're in, which seems like it happened really fast, LabVIEW Everywhere is a little bit different because now LabVIEW Everywhere is more of LabVIEW can plug into any other infrastructure out there.
Yep. Yeah, nobody's writing server applications in LabVIEW.
Yeah, I don't think I'd want to do that.
Yeah, I think it's possible, but nobody's. So I do want to mention your TED Talk. So you want to talk about that for like a few minutes?
Absolutely. So, and it's fun because the TEDx talk would not have happened without the LabVIEW community. So one of the things that I've always been intrigued about is creativity. I always felt like, I don't feel like I'm very creative. And as an engineer, we struggle with creativity because things work or they don't work. And so in several CLA summits over the years, particularly the ones in Europe, I would weave a little bit of creativity or principles behind creativity into those talks. And then during the pandemic, I was not traveling, I was not speaking anywhere, and that was so darn frustrating. So what I did is started thinking about, I want to start speaking outside of my NI profession collaboratively, but I wasn't going to leave NI, but I want to start doing some speaking gigs because some of the ladies that I work with at my co-working space, they are professional speakers. And so I was telling them about my creativity and my ideas around creativity and the process. It's the 3 I's of creativity. It's you input your ideas, you let it ideate or incubate, and then you ideate. And so one of my sassy friends says, "Oh, well, if you want to be a speaker, then you have 10 days to submit your application to the Cherry Creek TEDx Women's event." So my snarky friend gave me the challenge. And then my snarky friend, who I absolutely adore, Karen Ruth White, helped us, me and another friend, as we were putting together our applications. And I was accepted and then went through the process of giving my TEDx talk on stage. And if you want to go look at it, it is just Google YouTube TEDx and then Nancy Henson. And Henson is Henson. And what was really fun about the TEDx talk is I learned even more about creativity. And I'll give you an example. So Eric Ruffett and I are working on our keynote, and we have to have the keynote ready in about 6 days. And Eric says, "Oh, well, let's just go work on it on Friday. We'll just go bang it all out." I'm like, "Eric, I can't do that. I have to have 2 or 3 days because now I really understand my creative process. I have to do the first set of slides, and then in the morning when I'm enjoying my coffee, I'll have 10 ideas. And then I weave those ideas in. Next morning, coffee, 10 more ideas. I can't bang out creativity in front of a laptop on a Friday."
No, that's kind of the way I work too. Like I start out with an outline. So I'll start out with the slides and I'll lay out like the major things and I'll try to like fit them together. And then I fill in some details and then I try to rearrange it so it flows. And yeah, that's pretty crazy. Yeah, GLA Summit is definitely coming up. And yeah, I volunteered for a presentation. I'm not entirely sure why, but I'm only doing half of one. So
what are you presenting on?
Continuous delivery. So, continuous delivery or continuous deployment, depending on how you refer to it. So Casey and I are doing a presentation where we're going to talk about CI/CD a little bit, and then we're each going to do a demo of how we do it.
I think that's a really important ongoing conversation. One of the thoughts I had for a future event would be a town hall style meeting where somebody talks for 15 minutes, somebody talks for 15 minutes, and then there's a little bit of a panel discussion, and then at the end there's Q&A. And then we point individuals to here's where your best information is to keep learning about CI/CD. Because there's so many different ways to do it. And LabVIEW's come a long way to integrating well in a standard CI/CD process. And we have more things that we would like to do to improve LabVIEW that I really want us to figure out how do we have a really good conversation that someone can come into and onboard as quickly as possible to understanding CI/CD.
Yeah. The 2 issues I see with CI/CD is one, as you mentioned, there's so many different ways to do it. And depending on how you do it, there are a lot of different tools involved.
Yes.
That you have to understand. So that's part of it. And so the investment to get over that hump to be able to do it, I think is the large part of the challenge. Because if you have a small project, it can benefit from CI/CD,
Yeah.
but it's hard to justify the investment for that one little small project.
Right. And I'm working with a company right now that manufactures, we'll just call it a DUT.
Yep.
They manufacture a thing, and they really don't have a CI/CD process in place. And I think there's also a lot of opportunity here for you guys as partners to work with NI and work with NI Professional Services to come in and stand that up for customers. Because that customer is not going to be able to learn fast enough to do the absolute best implementation. And it gets into a little bit of the whole learning path. And I think the number is like, you have to spend, what is it, 10,000 hours at something before you fully master it?
Yeah, that's the Malcolm Gladwell thing.
Yeah. Okay, Malcolm. So right now I'm thinking college football and these young kids and how long they spent time. And then I look at, our community. And so a new engineer can do some really good basic stuff in LabVIEW. They can learn a lot really quickly, and they're going to solve a tightly scoped problem. But as soon as you get into something like CI/CD or larger architectures, you have to have a mentor or an architect that has screwed up a few times and made the mistakes to have the wisdom to come in and direct that team to that implementation.
I think you need a philosophy, I think, is part of the problem, because it's
I
the
think
way
you're right.
you look and think about the problem. Because when you're starting with nothing, you're trying to learn the tools and the philosophy both at the same time, and that's too much.
Yeah. I like how you phrase that, because I've been even thinking about this from a test standardization perspective. So if there's somebody that comes to NI and they have cobbled together tests and they really want to have a good structured test software stack. And at NI, we have a lot of fantastic tools. And oh my gosh, we're coming up with even more. So we've got LabVIEW as a development environment. We have TestStand as a very sophisticated sequencer that can also solve very, very simple problems very easily. We're investing in gRPC. We're moving things to Linux. There's SystemLink. There's all this stuff out there. And the challenge is to put together a model or a philosophy or a process so that someone can start thinking about the problem in a constructive manner.
Yeah. Well, I think why you need a philosophy goes back to the thing with the CI/CD is that everybody does things differently. So some people are using Azure, some people are using GitHub, some people are using GitLab.
Mm-hmm.
But the philosophy and the ideas behind it stay the same.
Exactly.
And so once you understand that, then you just look at the tools and you figure out how the tools fit in.
Right. And I think we sometimes in our industry get that backwards.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Because, if I'm a salesperson, I'm not thinking about selling a philosophy. In fact, I was actually on a phone call this morning, and one of my peers was talking about test standardization and messaging and philosophy around test standardization. It's like, you can't sell that. You can't put that in a catalog. And so as a salesperson, I need a product to sell. I need something that's clearly defined. But at the same time, when I'm buying that product, I need to understand that there is a philosophy that
there's a way it's intended to be used.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why Agile gets such a bad name, because everybody says, oh, I'm doing Jira, so I'm doing Agile. And it's like, no, not really. Like, it's a
Agile's
tool.
a tool.
Yeah.
It's a tool versus the philosophy and the process.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
We often, I feel like we always get the tools mixed up with the philosophy. For example, DevOps is like all the rage and people talk about, but some people refer to that, oh, I'm doing DevOps because I'm doing Docker or Kubernetes. And well, yes, but there's a philosophy behind that.
That supports that.
Yeah.
So one thing I wanted to make sure I mentioned briefly, because I got a fantastic message on LinkedIn today. Today, as of, what is today? November 9th? I think it's November 9th. Right. Yeah.
Yep.
So we're videoing here on November 9th. And so today, at the same time, we have NI's major event, NI Connect, going on in Munich.
Mm-hmm.
And we had NI Connect in Austin. It was a great networking opportunity. Absolutely loved it. And so a friend of mine sent me a message, one of our champions, because they were recognized. And so this was Falk that sent it. Viking Software, sorry.
Yeah.
Viking Software, and they were awarded their certificate for becoming a certified center of excellence,
There you go.
which is LabVIEW centric, but it's really test software centric. And so we had 10 different teams. So there were 8 partners, and then we had John Deere and we had ZF Mobility Solutions, all recognized at NI Connect in Munich today. And we had a lot of them because, well, we had a pandemic and we couldn't get on stage and shake hands and recognize people. And so the NI Center of Excellence program is something we kicked off. I think Steve Summers and I kicked that off in 2011. And it's grown organically. And we're still thinking about, now that we are NI and not just National Instruments, we're still trying to figure out where does that program exactly fit? And how does that program enable people to be more successful when they're developing their science and engineering projects? And I think when you said philosophy,
That's exactly
that's
what I
the
was thinking.
connectors. So we will look at, if somebody needs a philosophy, then going through this particular certification program and the process of going through that and learning only what you need to solve the first problem. And then okay, now here's the next problem I need to solve. And so there's something there of connecting COE with test standardization philosophy.
Well, if I remember correctly, it's been a long time since I looked at COE stuff, but I think it was not very prescriptive. It was like, you need a program to onboard people, but it doesn't tell you how. You need to do issue tracking of some kind, but it doesn't tell you how.
Exactly.
And so those are the things that I like getting that framework right.
Yeah. And so I'm going to mention 2 of the COEs real quickly. So John Deere, they were a team out of India, and they have a process that is just very simple for recognizing their engineers, kind of metricing their engineers, but not in an invasive way where it's like, oh, I don't measure up, but a very constructive way, and metricing their team. And it was really simple, and it really empowered the team, and it worked for them. Yep. And there was no magical tool that did this. It was a group of people that came up with, how do we know we need a process, what's going to be the best process for us?
Yeah. So let's talk about metrics for a minute, because this just came up recently. And it's in the news right now because Elon, fired all the Twitter engineers based on lines of code, right? And we're all looking at it and we say that lines of code are a bad measure, right? Yeah. For the most part. But I was on a call this morning, a guy was saying, well, lines of code can be good if you use it as an indicator, right? So if if you're the manager and you've got a team of 5 people and they're all working on the same project, you can look at how many lines of code that person puts out over the course of a year. And if you see it suddenly start to dip, excuse me. So if you see the person's lines of code suddenly start to dip, you know that something's going on. Right? Yeah. And you go investigate. And it might be something totally benign. Yeah. Like maybe you sent them to training for a week and sort of, But by trending that, you can kind of just get a metric for how things are going and look at the trend.
Yeah. Metrics are interesting because there are times when I shy away from metrics. I don't want anybody to have my personal identifying information, and I don't want someone to put a number to me. But at the same time, like you state there, metrics can be very, very informative. So NI's moved to a subscription model for all of our software. And what it's going to do is it's going to enable us to see which pieces of our software people are using and valuing and renewing. And then that will help us better invest in solving those kinds of problems. And even within the community, I'm going to want to be able to see how many people are involved. And when we see that people are really involved in the community, and those are the people that are excited and they're collaborating and they renew, then that gives me the opportunity to advocate for investing more in the community and buying more pizza and having more happy hours.
Cool. I like that idea. So it's been great talking to you, but we're running out of time now. So thank you for sharing your thoughts. I think it was a great interview.
Thank you, Sam. It was an absolute joy to be on here, and I really appreciate the invitation and the privilege to be here.
All right. Thank you. That's it for today's episode of the LabVIEW Experiment. Thanks for listening. If you have any comments or questions, head over to thelabviewexperiment.com and drop me a note. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at the LV Experiment so you never miss an episode. And remember, small steps and quick feedback are all you need. Catch you next time.